Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for joining us. Karen Pank, the Executive Director for the Chief Probation Officers of California, and we're hosting this webinar to have a conversation with the chiefs, a facilitated conversation, and we really thank you all for joining us. This, I believe, is our third installment on some of these webinars that we've been doing this year. This one is Finding the Balance, Personal Wellness. And personal wellness and probation specifically. And so we're really happy that you were able to join us and that we have the chiefs here today to kind of go over a couple of questions, get a chance to hear their perspective on the topic. We also hope that we'll be able to answer your questions as well. So please, we encourage you to use the Q&A feature to send us some questions. I know just from already the past practice, it's hard to get to all of the questions, which is actually a really good sign that there's a lot of interest out there. And what we will endeavor to do is get to as many of them as possible, and then also review some, if there's still some left over, try to maybe post some written responses after this webinar. So again, really appreciate you guys taking the time. Hopefully this shows that you're all trying to find some balance in your life, and hopefully we'll have some words of wisdom, I know we will, from the chiefs at least, to guide us in that part of the process. I think we understand that that this is a really important topic, and as next week we get set to celebrate the Probation Services Week, which is very exciting. You know, you have to really be sure that as you are doing all of the work and taking care of those who are in your caseloads and just in your everyday life that you come across, that you're also taking care of yourself. And so that's something that we often forget probably in probation, because you're always focused outward. You're always focused on how to make others' lives better, and that can be exhausting. So sharing some of those things are certainly the things that we want to do today. So I'll facilitate the conversation, and we will go from there, and really, again, appreciate the time. And we'll instead of going around the horn and introducing everybody one by one, we're going to do it as we take a question. So you kind of get some of the substance as you're getting a chance to meet folks. So the first person in the hot seat today is Chief Haynes from Fresno. I didn't even tell them who was going first, and so you saw the surprise on his face. And but I know chiefs are very good on their feet, and so he'll be ready to roll. But as by way of introduction, Chief Haynes is 27 years in probation, 3 years as the chief. And this time we asked chiefs, those of you who've watched the other webinars, we try to mix it up, but this time we asked chiefs to describe yourself in 3 words. And so, and I would have to say, I really agree with many of their words that they shared. But Chief Haynes: humble, empathetic, and practical. Really great words to embody someone who's going to talk to us about wellness. And we asked for an inspirational quote around this topic, and yours was, "My grace is sufficient for you. My power is made perfect in weakness." Corinthians. And so that's a great way to start, I think, our discussion. And specifically, I was hoping you could share with us, what is the most draining part of your job, and what do you do to take care of yourself? How do you work through some of those things?
Wow. So thank you, Karen. And I appreciate everybody joining us on this important topic today. Wow. That's a big question. What doesn't drain me about this job is probably the better answer. But what I think the biggest thing is that this job is a 24/7 job. As chief, as you make that conscious decision to be the one who is going to lead the agency, you knew that it was going to be a nonstop, never ending. The responsibilities never stop. And so the 24/7 aspect of the job was one of the biggest, and has been one of the biggest things, I think, for me to make an adjustment to. And talking about draining, if I was to allow that to really permeate the work that I do, and also let it impact what's going on at home, it really can be a drain on your well-being, and on just your psyche, and just being comfortable in who you are. The phone always is on, the email is always on. One thing that I had to do when I became chief was, it took about a year to make the adjustment to just the constant being alert about what's going on at work. And so it impacted sleep, it impacted how you were able to relax and rest. And so I think that has been probably the biggest thing that I had to kind of remember for myself. And so as I have tried to work through that, one of the things I try to do is to take the advice that I give to my staff, and to people who that I'm close to, and that is that the job that we do is really important. And I mean, the entire job, with your probation officer, juvenile correctional officer, clerical, anything you do, it really, the work that we do is really important, but it's not so important that it should impact what you do in your regular life. And so when I look at my job, just like I hope that people look at your jobs, is that it's a mean to an end. It's a mean for you to be able to take care of your families, for you to be able to have the kind of life that you would want to be able to have. And so keeping the job in proper perspective, I think, is really important when I think about the pressures of the job, and how they can impact you. And so so it took a little bit of time, and it's taken time to kind of compartmentalize work. And then when you're at home, you're at home. And when I'm at work, then I try not to bring the home things into the job. And so to be able to kind of manage that has been one of the things that I can do to really take on what happens with that 24/7 aspect of the job. And I know this isn't just a chief kind of a thing, right? Because many of us who work operations in juvenile institutions and those kind of things, the world is a 24/7 world. And so I know administrators and a lot of our officers who are doing this thing, you have to have the ability to turn those things off, have a proper perspective, dedicate time to doing things that are enjoyable and fun for you, making sure that you get enough rest and sleep, exercise, all those things. Have an outlet. You got to have an outlet so that you don't let the job kind of overwhelm everything that you do. So if I had to say one thing, Karen, it would be, that's been probably the biggest draining part of the job, is being able to go home and turn it off when you can. Sometimes it's impossible to, but in your mind, to be able to separate it.
Well, I appreciate that. And you kind of, in your answer, already answered one of the first questions that we got, which is, how do you balance the work home life balance, right? And I think actually, if we can think about that for all of you as we go through the questions today, it seems as though that kind of permeates. And perspective is something that I'm hearing you say through your comments, and and the difficulty in doing that, and recognizing that that's true. I mean, you're not going to be successful in all of those efforts each and every time, but you're reminding yourself that is an important thing to to try to achieve. And that was very, very helpful. And kind of keeping that perspective, recognizing that there's different viewpoints and different journeys, that happen. I'm going to jump to our next chief, Chief Gonzales, from currently Los Angeles County, but you've worn several hats in your career and in several different places, but 5.5 years in probation, 5 years in San Diego. You're fairly new in LA, but 5 months in LA probably equates to a little bit, feeling a little longer. I know you've jumped right in and had a lot to learn about in the new setting. And so, that's really exciting. You have, though, other experience that you're bringing to the table, not just probation experience. And so I'm certainly interested to hear a little bit about that, both coming from the National City Police Department, as well as the San Diego DA's office, obviously San Diego Probation, and now LA. Your 3 words is kind, compassionate, and humble. Again, perfect setup for today's discussion. And your inspirational quote was, be kind to everyone, be considerate of others, and be patient. All things that we see you do around our table at CPOC. And so I can personally attest to that is a very apt description. And so thank you for sharing your time with us today. We were hoping you would talk a little bit about what some of the ways for you to take care of your physical health in light of the stressors sometimes that come along with the job.
Thank you, Karen, and thank you everyone for being here, and also my colleagues here on the panel. Chief Haynes covered a lot of what I was going to say, but to say that I have actually about 21 years of experience as a chief, assistant chief of police with San Diego Police Department. I was there for 26 years. During the time that I was there, we lost over 8 officers that were killed on the line of duty. So we're talking about stress and how you deal with that. What we learned very quickly is not only our personal health, but our mental health as well. And we talk a lot about being subjected to secondary trauma in our line of work today. And I think it's important that we balance that. So I think the physical health, we mentioned earlier, exercise. What I do, I belong to 2 gyms. One's a 24-hour fitness, and the other one's the LA Fitness. Not because I was coming to LA that I joined the LA Fitness. I joined LA Fitness because it was closer to home at the time. And I had a membership to 24-hour fitness, but then they stopped having 24 hours at the 24-hour fitness. So we couldn't go during the evenings after work. That's why I went to LA Fitness. So it's always important to maintain some level of activity, whether you're running, you're jogging, you participate in a Baker to Vegas run, for example, or you take the kids out of the facility on a community run like a 5K or half marathons. It's staying active. It never stops. Moving to Los Angeles, I don't have a 24-hour fitness or LA Fitness nearby. So what I do, I walk around the neighborhood. There's a 5-mile track around our complex that I enjoy walking and jogging. I don't run as much as I used to, but at least I get out there and exercise. Trying to get in my 10,000 steps a day. I have a wristwatch that tells me how I'm doing. I didn't have that before. This is something new that I just obtained. And mentally is staying fit in reading and having conversations. And some people like to do crossword puzzles. I think it helps you stay sharp, and also with wording. I'm not very good at spelling, so I tend to stay away from that. But I do like to talk to a lot of people. People that I don't even know, people that I just come across, and just practice my soft skills. I think it's very important to have real strong soft skills as you go up through the organization, because you need that more than your technical skills. But I think what's important is to really get some sleep and rest, is what I tell my staff. And I know in our job, we're 24/7, and I learned very quickly that a lot of what we're doing can wait to the next day, unless it's really an emergency officer injured that's gone to the hospital, you need to respond, for example, or something really critical. Most of the requests, even from the board offices, can wait to the next day. But I think we stress ourselves out. And if we have more stress, I used to have hair. I'm trying to be like Chief Keene now. Is that I'm losing a lot of my hair. And it's all related to stress. So I try to balance work life is very important. When I'm at home, just mentioned before, I focus on home. Try to keep the work out of the home. But I do bring a lot of work home to read, to prepare for the next day, to prepare for the week, to prepare for a board meeting, to prepare for the media questions that may come up. So it's a lot happening. And the thing is, it's not just us, but our staff. And so what I've learned over the last 5 years, especially on probation, is to tell my executive staff, I won't call you like I used to before, because I know if I call you or text you or email you, you're going to go to your assistant, who's going to go to the staff, you try to get answer to my questions that could wait till the next day. When I first came to LA, I would get up early, 3 o'clock in the morning. I'm sending emails to my staff. I'm hoping they'll get the emails at 8 o'clock when they come into work. They were getting the emails at 3 o'clock in the morning. I didn't realize that at the time, so I caught myself, said, no, I'm not going to do that. So I sent the emails to myself, and then the next morning I forwarded to my staff. And because I know how they are, they're very diligent. All of our employees want to do the best job that they can. So if you ask for a question, they're going to research it and get back to you. So that's why I'm trying to balance not just my life experience or my work experience, but also my staff. So I'm telling my staff that if I call you, I'll send you a 911 call. This is urgent. This is really pressing. If not, it can wait till the next day. And the other thing is having meetings that you can terminate or conclude your meetings by the end of the business day. Don't go beyond like 8 o'clock at night. You got so much to do, the community meetings, board meetings, everything else. You don't need to add additional stressors to our staff. And the other thing is believe it or not, is drinking a lot of water. Drinking a lot of water. Doctors tell me you got to drink at least 32 ounces of water a day. Keeping water in your system, staying hydrated will help you balance your body, your life. So it's important not just physically, but also internally. There you go, Karen. Not just Diet Cokes, but water. Water goes a long way. So to me, it's like I've been doing this job for public safety for almost 44 years. And very challenging in probation because we're not police, we're not sheriffs, we're not social workers, we're probation officers. We wear many different hats, but people are pulling us from different directions. And I think we need to remember that we're here to serve our courts. Some people seem to forget that we're part of the courts. And also that we have employees that are so dedicated that many of them stress out or have health issues. I can tell you, in it's sad over the last 5.5 years, I had at least 5 officers who have passed away through medical conditions. So I always wanted to do a wellness unit. I did that in San Diego Probation Department. We created an entire wellness unit. And I want to do the same thing here in Los Angeles, create a multifaceted wellness unit, not just peer support, not just a chaplain program, but a wellness program that talks about spiritual, physical, emotional, financial, everything that deals with each and every one of us on a daily basis. I know it takes time. I know it's complicated. I don't have any interest in any of the providers that come in and talk to our staff. I'm not getting any kind of royalties or anything. I just want to make sure we do it right for the right reasons for our people. Our staff deserves the best, and that's what I want to do. Thank you for the question, Karen.
Thank you. I really appreciate you sharing. I will say a few things, kind of hit the top of my head as soon as you said it. One, kind of counting your steps or monitoring your steps. Sadly, that's a stressor for me because it just reminds me of how much of a failure I am at achieving some of those goals. But it's a good reminder that, those are important pieces of things that we need to incorporate into our lives. And it's the second time already we've heard that sleep and rest is really important. And we have to remind ourselves and our staff, that those are things, to continue to kind of keep an eye on. So really, I think those are good things to remember. Also, just really quickly before we go to our next question, I do want to remind folks that welcome you to put in a question in the Q&A if you would like to ask something more directly of the chief. The next chief that we'd like to introduce you to is Chief Hansen from Solano County. And Chief Hansen has 36 years in probation, 9 as chief. And you too have different paths. You have some experience from the federal system as well. So you've seen this 9 years in the federal system. Your 3 words to describe yourself. And believe me, when I asked this of everybody, I was a little bit curious, maybe concerned about what might come back from Chief Hansen, but of course they were very good words and very applicable. Fun, busy, compassionate. Spot on. You guys really know yourselves very well. Those are definitely words I would use to describe you as well. Your inspirational quote is, "Put your mask on first before helping others." And honestly, we toyed around with utilizing that as the name of this webinar, because that was one of the things that I think we really tend to forget. It was the one quote I remember flying once hearing, and as a mom, it really spoke to me in a way that I had never, and it's pretty rare for something to jolt, me out of thinking and like I've heard something new. That would definitely, hit me specifically. Like that is something we tend to forget when we are caring for others, and it's in our, it's in our DNA in various different aspects of our life. And so what a great reminder. And it's kind of what we're trying to do here today. So Chief Hansen, besides just welcoming you and of course, opening up the floor to you, I do have a specific question that I'm hoping you can answer, which is how would you advise a colleague to take care of themselves if they were feeling burnt out or stressed? So, talk to your friends, right? And tell us what you would tell them when they are in a little crisis.
Well, thank you so much, Karen. And I appreciate you having me, and I appreciate you all being here along with my colleagues. And for me, it was always stressful on the plane because I have twins, so I had to put the child with the most potential next to me because that would be the next one that got the mask. And the child with the least potential would get the mask last. So my hope was I'd make it to the last child, but if not, I had one with the most potential. And I looked at potential of which nursing home they would put me in. My son would probably do cut rate. My daughter would be a decent one. So my daughter always sat next to me. So, in life, we have to figure these things out. And, we are in such a unique profession that is so cool, right? We wear a different hat almost every day we come into the office. We take care of people, right? We are good at that. We are good at looking at our clients, looking at their needs, addressing them. What we don't do is take care of ourselves, right? We're always doing for others and forgetting about ourselves. And if Chief Gonzales was my client and I saw him and that he needed help, I'd be the first one to say, Adolfo, you're looking stressed. You need, what can I do to help you? In our profession, though, if Chief Neal is my colleague, I'd be going, hey, Karen, Tracy looks a little stressed. What do you think? We're not talking to each other. We talk about each other. And we really miss that. We miss the point of we need to take care of each other and watch each other. After we have our oxygen mask on, we have to look at others to see who may need the oxygen, right? And sometimes we talk about that person, we don't talk to them. And we need to make sure we do that because we all experience stress in this job. We all experience burnout. The key is to addressing that prior to when it becomes a problem. And so you follow the advice of Chief Haynes and Gonzales, you got to take care of yourself, right? If you don't take care of yourself, no one else will. And for me, I traveled around the country. I worked on a resilience video and it was stressful. I was on 12 planes in 5 days. I was in 4 states in those times. I was nonstop, plus other traveling. 2 days after I got home, I was in the hospital for a week with pneumonia and some other stuff. And at that point I said, is this really worth it? And I needed to start taking care of myself. And that's my advice is you have to take care of yourself. And that if you come to me with saying you're stressed and burned out, we're here to help, but you got to get some help, right? There's nothing wrong with getting help. And we're so good at telling people to get help, but we're not good at receiving help. And so there's no stigma to that. There's no shame. The shame and stigma come in is when you burn out and crash, and it could have been prevented. Somebody told me, which I thought was really good advice, is if I pass away today, there'll be a lot of sad people, right? My colleagues will be sad. Now, some at my funeral, if I'm in the casket, will have kind of a pin to be poking me to make sure I'm dead. That's a few might, right? But who's going to be impacted is my family, right? My colleagues are going to be there and they're going to be sad for a little bit, but I leave my family. And so remember, as Chief Haynes said, this is a job, right? This is our profession, but it does not define who you are. And it should not consume you. And if you find that you're stressed and burning out because it's consuming you, it's time to take a step back. Figure out what you need. I buried one of my officers in Las Vegas, right? I was at his funeral. I was talking at his funeral. He left behind an 8-year-old child. He didn't know how to handle stress and burnout. He got addicted to Oxycontin after a surgery, and he OD'd. And all that started because he was so stressed. He went, right, had surgery he really didn't need and got the medication, and the rest is kind of history. And I look at that and say, what should we have done? How should we have handled that? And it was tough, because we all own that. We want to take care of each other. My thing is we need to head that off before it happens. And sometimes we need to take a step back and follow Chiefs Haynes' advice and Gonzales is that this is a job. This does not define who you are, and it's not worth your life. You need help, get help. And I think you will hear that from my colleagues as we go on, but there is no shame in that. So thank you.
What great advice, and very poignant. And, I am sure everybody who's listening to this, myself included, feels as if this could potentially be a bit of an intervention. I mean, I think we are all guilty of potentially not seeing the signs of needing to take, stock of ensuring that we have the mask on. And the other thing that was kind of, picking up in the comments, especially there at the end, is that prevention is a heck of a lot cheaper than fixing the problem after it gets to the crisis point. And, clearly we all don't have the answers as to how to best do that. I mean, I'm certainly not an expert. I'm sure none of you are trying to put yourself out as one either, except that we're all caring and compassionate human beings who, need to look out for each other. So those are all really, really helpful notes. And while helpful, that doesn't fit the fun. So we're going to come back and hopefully get you helping us laugh, because that's also really helps with the wellness piece of our day to day. So the next chief I want to introduce you to is another person who is a repeat performer on our webinars. Chief Neil, you've done one of these before, and so I appreciate you coming back. But for those of you who might be hearing from you the first time, I'm not sure if you didn't know if it was 24 or 25 years in probation, or you're in between or somewhere, but it seems like that's a big one coming up. So that's great. And you're 7 years as chief. And this is such a, I'll have to take a point of personal privilege as well, such a mom thing to do. Your 3 words that you gave to describe yourself, you refused to do it. I would have probably done the same. I'm going to steal this from you. You asked your 16-year-old daughter instead to describe you, and her description of 3 words was leader, passionate, and strong-minded. I think I too would use those words to describe you. So that makes her brilliant, or me, one of the two. So that's great, and I appreciate you joining us. Your quote, for those of you who saw you last time, this will make some sense too, is there is no path to happiness. Happiness is the path. Or when life gives you scraps, make a quilt. Our quilter, Chief Neil, thanks again for joining us today. And, obviously it's a very serious topic, but again, I love to have the opportunity for folks to get to know each of you a little bit. What's one thing that you would like to see done to improve wellness in our profession? I know it's something you're really passionate about and have been working on various different things within your department. And what is the best thing you've seen adopted in our profession to maybe help advance wellness?
Yeah, thank you, Karen. Thanks for having me today on this very important webinar. And I appreciate you inviting me to this to be part of it, because I am very passionate. I learned very early on in my career that I have to be in good health and feel good and love everything as part of my day and what I'm doing in order to be able to come into the office and bring that that energy into the office and to the work that I do. So it's a topic I'm passionate about. You know, the one thing that I would really like to see in our profession is us as a profession being able to have time within our work week to allow our staff to be able to do wellness on the job. I know other public safety departments have that as part of their organizations, and I just feel that it would provide some support in allow the time in somebody's schedule to be able to take care of themselves. So many staff work really hard all day and then they head home to take care of their families and their young children. Sometimes they're taking care of their parents or other relatives that might need support. And a lot of times staff don't get to take care of themselves or be able to exercise or go for a short walk or whatever they need because they just don't have the time in the day. And so I really, you know, and I'm probably stepping out there a little bit, but I mean, I know for my department, I would love for my staff to be able to carve out an hour of their work week to be able to do some of that self-care, as well as be able to have the facilities on site for them to be able to walk down to a wellness room, to do some meditation or some yoga or some stretching because they've been, you know, typing a pre-sentence report all morning. And so I think that's something that, you know, as probation departments really start to embrace wellness and self-care for staff I'm hoping we'll see more of that. I know it's definitely a larger component because it involves, you know, unions and negotiations, and we need to have the support from the Board of Supervisors and county CEOs. But I do think it is an area that I would like to see, and I know it's something that I know my staff would like to see. You know, they'd love to go down to the fitness center and just use an hour out of the week and get some of that exercise or whatever it may be, the yoga studio, whatever, you know, staff need, because there are, when you think about wellness, there's so many different outlets, so many in, you know, whether it's meditation, exercise, you know, deep breathing, walking, there are so many options. You know, I know a lot of staff and people do cycling. When I first came to Shasta County, we had a group of staff that would rollerblade during lunch, and they were very consistent. And so it's such a wide variety, but I would love to see probation departments, you know, be able to do that as other public safety departments have done. And then to the second part of your question, you know, the one thing that I think I've seen in the last couple of years is we're talking about it, right? You know, secondary trauma, vicarious trauma, we're having the conversations, and there's a lot of research out there about the impacts that we have from working in this profession and the stress that it causes. And I think that's a big part of it, is that, you know, for years, we never talked about it, you know, and there was the stigma around, if you did need help, you know, you were weak, or that's not where you should come from. And so I think for years it was kind of bottled up. And, you know, it's been the last couple of years that it's really been leading. You know, it's a common topic. And I know many of us are focused on increasing wellness and starting wellness initiatives within our department. And so I think that's a big change. And I think that we're here today talking about it openly and really acknowledging the work is stressful, and we do need to take the time to take care of ourselves and support each other and acknowledge that, you know, we need to do it.
That's really, as every other comment so far today is really kind of rung true to at least me, hopefully those of you who are watching as well. You know, we talk a lot around our table, obviously, about policies and about, you know, the future of the profession and how to help the people that we serve. And, you know, we've talked a lot, even in our past meeting, about, you know, our job is really to provide hope to those we serve, to provide opportunities, to provide support. And so that's obviously what our staff does. I mean, I'm sure next week we'll see a lot of those things on display as we kind of really celebrate Probation Services Week. But, you know, we have to remind staff that all of those things apply to, you should also be doing that for yourselves and for your colleagues as well. And we are deserving of all of that. The other thing that I took from your comments is, if I was feeling as a failure for not getting my steps in, I shudder at the thought of rollerblading. But that's this is all helpful. I'm working through these things as we speak too, so that really makes a lot of sense. So I appreciate that. Chief, the next chief, Chief Richart, thank you for joining us. You've got 25 years in the profession. I just can't even imagine that. So I feel like I've known you for many of those years as well. 14 years as chief. And describe yourself in 3 words: calm, compassionate, innovative. Again, I can't call a party foul on anybody's choices. These are definitely spot on words. And your inspirational quote, you might have to give us a little bit of description and context for, is, "I'm never going to let the old man in." So, so you're going to need to answer that at the front end of your comments, but I'll throw your question your way as well and hand you the mic. What are some ways you take care of your mental health? And do you feel as if officers have access and our staff to enough of the mental health resources? So take it away.
Well, thank you, Karen. I appreciate you having me here today. I appreciate everybody being here today because it is such an important topic. I think anytime you get an opportunity to invest in yourself, you're on that path to creating wellness, and this is one of those opportunities. So for everybody that took the time to tune in and share some ideas, that's fantastic. And then, of course, to all my panel members, it's good to see you all again. And it was fantastic to be able to see, I think, almost all of you last week at our first in-person Chiefs meeting in the last year and a half. And I can't begin to emphasize enough how important it is to have those connections and those relationships with peers and people that understand what you do for a living. And for chiefs, it's obviously to a large extent the staff that we work with, but also other chiefs, people that are in our chairs and have a sense of the stresses and the struggles that are in our job. So to the quote, I pulled that one out for the context of this conversation because I think one of the things that work creates is stress, obviously. But one of the things that stress creates, I think, and it's insidious because we don't know it's happening each and every day, and then it just sort of comes and visits us all of a sudden one day, is the aging that takes place because of the stress that you go through. And when most of that comes through work, we have to be careful and cognizant of all the stress that we're under because it will age you. And when I say age, I don't just mean the appearance on your face. I mean all those systems in your body that keep you alive and keep you healthy and keep you happy, that it affects and impacts all of those things. And so if we're not paying attention to our health, our wellness, our mental health, and managing the stress that we experience in work, then it will take a toll on you, and you will find yourself one day looking in the mirror and going, what happened? So when I think about the quote, it was actually a Clint Eastwood quote. They were asking him at the age of, I think, 84, 85, and he was producing another movie. And they said, when are you going to slow down? He said, why would I? I'm never going to let the old man in. And it struck me that I thought, well, now those are words to live by, and I appreciate them. So back to that notion of stress for just a minute. When you think about what contributes to most of the stress in your life, most people would put in the top 3 like relationships, money, and work stress. Work stress, if you look at polling, usually comes out number 1 or number 2 on everybody's list. That work stress is the worst kind of stress that they experience. So knowing that that's a fairly consistent theme it seems reasonable for all of us to consider the type of stress that we're experiencing and how to manage that through our mental health, by being proactive and not just trying to figure out how to reduce stress after you've left work for the day, but how do you reduce stress while you're at work during the day? I was at a friend's retirement party last night, and one of the people that was giving some words to the gathered crowd was talking about how, in his mind, that when you really achieve a good work-life balance, to speak to the first question that came around in our queries there, in order to achieve a good work-life balance, you should almost blur the lines between work and fun. That work and fun should sort of flow in and out of every aspect of your life, so that there isn't this defining line like at 5:30, 6 p.m., I cut off work and now I go do my life. Especially when you are an executive, especially when you work in community corrections, work doesn't really ever go away. Work is always there. But if you can figure out how to package work into a more fun package to make it a more pleasant experience, then blurring the lines between work and life is okay. You don't need to cut out work and leave it at the door and then come home to your family and just live a different life. Because quite frankly, if you think that's actually happening, you might be deluding yourself a little bit just by sort of mentally checking out of those things, because the stress doesn't go away; it follows you and it stays with you, and so you have to be able to manage it in different ways. And so I think Chief Hansen and I have had a variety of interests in this area. I think when it comes to how we manage our offices and how we manage our people and how we try to infuse fun into the culture, into the environment. First of all, by being a little bit more relaxed, a little bit more fun, taking things that are very, very serious issues, because what we do is serious work, in case you hadn't noticed. We have people's lives in our hands, and that kind of matters a little bit. That there are ways to acknowledge that and be respectful of that and professional about that while still having fun. And so, for example, as Karen mentioned, next week is probation, pretrial, parole, supervision week, and really my committee that is putting together activities around that. All those activities were just designed to be fun. So pancake breakfast, the chief's making pancakes, and we're just putting together this communal environment, cornhole tournaments, getting together for ice cream socials, all of that. Infuse all of that into your environment so that the work stress gets reduced in the work environment, and it's not you're searching for the relief of that work stress somewhere outside the environment. The other thing that I would say is it's about perspective and attitude. If you have a high expectation of the way things should be versus the way things actually are, that gap in between your desired state and your current state is your stress. And so accept the brutal realities of life and of work. Understand that you're always pursuing something better. You're never going to get to perfection, but you can always strive for better. And in that effort is the calm that I like to find. I know I'm always pursuing improvements in my life, in my health, etc. I'm never going to be perfect at it, and I'm not going to beat myself up over it. But I'm always knowing that the little things I do every day, from the drinking the water, going to the gym, having the rituals that allow me to have order in the chaos, so to speak, those things all bring a sense of calm to me and help reduce the stress. So that would be the way I would say I take care of my mental health. To answer your second question, Karen, are there enough resources? No, because we haven't gotten good in our communities, in our culture here in corrections, of identifying what actually needs to be done. I'll tell you a real brief, two brief vignettes, actually. One, I left corrections in 2010 once. And quite frankly, as I look backwards on it and I'm able to identify maybe part of the reasons, I was burnt out. I was burnt out after not that long in the career, but about 4 years in the chair as a chief, and realized that that burnout's a real thing. Unfortunately, I realized it relatively young, and I was able to change my ways, so to speak, and begin to look at life in a different way. The second thing that I would say is I had an experience when I worked in Alameda County where there was an event that occurred in one of our institutions that should have really shaken me quite a bit. And it didn't. It had no impact on me whatsoever. I had no emotion about it. And that event, that non-reaction on my part scared me a little bit, because it told me that perhaps I was becoming a little bit calloused to life and to people. And so I did a lot of introspection about that and began to pursue additional ways of relieving stress on the job, so that I didn't carry it around with me and have it, let it impact my relationships with people. So that's how I take care of my mental health. And we really need to focus more as a profession on finding ways for our staff to have that mental health relief 8 to 5.
Thank you so much, Chief. Really appreciate it. One of the Q&A comments that we just received just kind of underscores something that you had said, and they were also agreeing, that what you were saying about, perfection really shouldn't be the goal. But, it's kind of the constant improvement is a good goal. It's not that we're saying, you should just accept not wanting to continue to improve upon whatever you're doing in your life. But if you set out as perfection as the goal, that gap, you're right, is really where we find our stress. So again, feel like this is a little bit of an intervention, so I'm taking lots of notes. Appreciate it. Chief Keene, we're going to go to you now and talk to you a little bit. Thanks again for rejoining us. This will be your second turn at the microphone. You shared some of your information as well, 23 years in probation, 8 as chief. And I love this because your words were different. There was a lot of similarities, I would say, in the rest of your colleagues' words, but you picked serious, loyal, and eccentric, which I would definitely also say fits you and is unique and what at least we've heard so far today. So I appreciate that. I would also add that your inspirational quote, I have to read it because it's a little bit long, but it's a real good one. Beware of turning into the enemy you fear most. All it takes is to lash out violently at someone who has done you some grievous harm, proclaiming that only your pain matters in this world. More than against that person's body, you will then, at that moment, be committing a crime against yourself. Ariel Dorfman. Whoa, we probably should have started there. Really super deep, very much fits your 3 words, serious, loyal, and eccentric. That was really quite a quote. So you'll have to talk a little bit about that as well in your comments. But before I turn over to the microphone to you, your question for today to get us started is, what are some activities that you engage in to reduce stress? I want to know if you rollerblade. And has that been something you found early or later in your life to help you manage some of those wellness issues?
Well, thank you very much, Karen. And thank you to everyone who's here today. It's great to see my peers again. You guys are my family, so it's always wonderful to be in your company. I'm not sure if you planned it this way, but I think that coming to me at this point in the conversation works really well because frankly, I am a very good example of a cautionary tale of what happens when you don't put your wellness first and how you have to come back around to it if you're fortunate enough to do so, right? If your health holds up, if your mental health holds up, and you're able to kind of grab that bull by the horns and get it back on track, what that looks like. For me, and as he often does, Chief Richart has set up a very perfect kind of handoff to me because so much of what he talked about really resonated with me in my path, in my career path. Because I too had got to a point where I had really burnt out. And before I became chief, I had significantly contemplated following a totally different direction of work because I just felt like I was done. I was stressed out. I felt like my health was certainly becoming compromised. Blood pressure was through the roof to the point of, being hypertensive. Just really had gotten to a point where I almost didn't recognize myself. And so what I had to do is I had become really good at giving advice to other people, but not following it myself. And so, as Brian said, it's something that happened in my point in my career where I had to really take a step back and say, you're responsible for your own health. You're responsible for your own wellness, and you have to make some real decisions and some conscious decisions to change and go to a different path. And so, I kind of had to laugh when Chief Gonzales talked about sending those 3 a.m. emails, because I was that person because that was what was done to me. And so I started to believe that that's what it meant to be an administrator. So it was constantly being on, sending those emails at 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, having these very well-meaning, but probably misplaced, lofty expectations of other people. And as Brian pointed out, that gap between the two resonated with me almost every day. And I think one of the main things that I didn't do from a wellness perspective is that I tried to be two different people. I tried to be one person at work and then somebody else at home, which is completely impossible to do. You can't decide you're going to be one way in one place and another one, and when you get home. And so that became really abundantly clear to me as my health started to fail. And I really had to say to myself, okay, I have to figure out what's happening here, because I know all the answers. I'm just not following my own advice. And it's funny, I can laugh about it now, but there's this NyQuil commercial that I always tell people to look up that I think really epitomizes what happens at time when you get into this this kind of hamster wheel type mentality. So in this commercial, the lady, she's sick, and so of course they're saying, "Hey, take some NyQuil. You'll get a good night's sleep. You'll feel better." While she's struggling to sleep, an image of her boss appears in her head, right? And so the person's off to the side. And so, the boss is kind of sending all these messages about what, things she needs to do and this, that, and the other. And she says, "Hey, I'm going to need you to answer that email before you wake up." Right. And it's hilarious in the moment. But when I take a step back, I'm like, holy crap, that's me, you know? And so as I transitioned to be chief, one of the first things I know I tried to be, to be cognizant of was making these very unrealistically crazy expectations of other people, and to really scale back my own kind of way in which I was running. One of the things that's so intriguing for me about the whole project is that concept of a revving engine that stays up in the tach meter and is just revving and revving and revving. That certainly resonated with me. So when I think about your question, I do a lot of things now that I think have really put me in a very positive space in terms of my health, my emotional health, my mental health, my relationship with the people that I love. But I wish I had found it earlier in my career. This is my 23rd year in probation, 33rd year in law enforcement in general. And it's just one of these things where my hope is that as an industry, we're going to do a better job of front loading these things into our young staff's mind and their career so they can find the balance. And so things that I do, certainly a lot of things have been talked about already. Certainly the exercise. Exercise has become an extremely important outlet for me because it allows me to deal with that kind of competition bug that we all have, because we find ourselves in these positions because we are competitive people. We do like to win at things. And so having access to exercise, for me, boxing and Krav Maga has been a great way for me to kind of really focus. But at the same time too, I can't always punch and hit things, even as much as I may like to. So blending in a little, some meditation, some yoga, and just some really dedicated time in nature. We're very fortunate in our county in the sense that the county's been very supportive of wellness. We do have a gym, a fitness facility inside of our facility, which allows our staff to utilize it. They contributed and created a great wellness program that has financial incentives tied to it, that actually also ties in with your individual health provider. So it's this really holistic 360 approach. And so we've been very fortunate that the county has been supportive of that. So it's possible for us to stop in the middle of the day and go take a walk, or, kind of get out and just kind of get a little bit of air, for lack of a better way to put it. And so doing that a lot has been helpful for me, just really focusing myself around the things that I need, following my own advice. And I tell people all the time that there's a way to do this work really well without compromising the rest of your life. You don't have to, if you have the wrong mentality, and it was referenced earlier, if you think your life is going to start once you retire or once you go home. Unfortunately, we see too often examples of people who retire and within a year or two, they pass. And that is because of that buildup of vicarious stress and the damage, as Chief Richart said, in terms of internally what it does to you and how it changes your mentality. And so preparing yourself, just no different than, we have stocks and bonds and retirements. Look at your wellness and health the same way. Invest in that. Take time and energy and effort and put things into that. No different than when you put money into your 401k or you go invest in some type of other, tangible investment. If you're not around to enjoy those things, it won't matter. And so most of us really want to have a long career, but more importantly, we want to have a long life with our family members and do all the things that I know when we get together and talk, we always talk about. So just in closing, the reason why I chose that quote is because it really, I think, encompasses what happens when stress and kind of frustration runs your life. We're going to always deal with people who may not necessarily see the world the way we see it, right? We're going to always deal with people who at times may say we're wrong or may not like us or may even verbalize that by calling us names or the like. If we get caught up in this idea that it's my own personal responsibility to go seek vengeance or retribution every time somebody does you wrong, you're going to not only impact your health, but you're going to spin out in a way that you won't like who you become. So you may think that by getting vengeance on somebody who's done you wrong is going to help you feel better. It actually really doesn't. The way to kind of transition and move away from these types of things is, quite frankly, not to make it turn you into something that you don't like. So when I first saw that quote, probably 15 years ago, it has resonated with me and stayed a part of how I see the world, because there's always going to be somebody who's going to say something that's going to be off-putting or whatever else. And that doesn't mean at times when it's appropriate, you don't respond. But for the most part, it's easier just to let things go, be about who you are, stay true to yourself, than to have somebody turn you into something that you don't like.
Well, very important, serious as this topic is. And yes, that's one of the reasons why I get to facilitate. I may know you all better than you know yourselves. So I do try to work the things in. I feel like I have the unique opportunity of seeing all of you share, help each other, sometimes be vulnerable, which you have also done on this topic. I mean, I think it's got to be noted, and I noted in some of the comments and the questions that we're receiving, people recognize that as well. It's not always an easy topic, and to make yourselves as leaders, vulnerable to your staff and really trying to encourage them to take this topic seriously. And the best way to do so is to talk about why it's important to you and your personal health and well-being. It's a good way to do it, right? Mimic, what I'm telling you, but also what I'm doing. So I think that is really invaluable for the staff. And hopefully, I know I have found it that way. I would imagine, based on some of the comments we received, others are seeing that as well. So again, really thanking you for doing that. We've been trying to, it looks like some folks are typing in some questions, but most of them have been comments, and some of which might be really helpful to just share for the greater audience, because I believe these are only visible to us. But there's been some examples of what other counties whose chiefs maybe aren't represented here are doing. For example, the peer support team. I know a lot of departments utilize those And again, that has been very helpful in dealing with response to some crises especially, but maybe, also to prevent us getting to the crisis portion, which I think is also been in your comments. The wellness room, people were talking about really liking that idea that was mentioned by Chief Neal. An interesting thing that I hadn't heard of, not sure if any of the other chiefs on this call have, so I'll just throw it out. This person's department has a wellness benefit. So it's up to $1,000 a year to use towards wellness, such as a gym membership or exercise equipment or therapy. It must be approved by the chief before it can be purchased, but it sounds like they've been doing this for over about 4 years now. So I'm not sure if anybody here has done anything like that in their departments or been in another department where that's been available. Chief Gonzales?
Thank you, Karen. When I was in San Diego PD, they used to have that incentive to try to keep the officers' weight down, because obviously we do a lot of running and police officers chasing people that don't want to talk to us. So they try to encourage us by giving us a few $1,000s. I think it was $2,000 to $3,000, depending on how you score on the firearms qualification, your written exams, your monthly written exams, as well as the physical fitness, your whole flexibility, how many push-ups can you do, I'm gonna go into like academy anew, and those who score the highest will get the highest amount. But then someone went out and did roller skating at a community roller rink, hurt themselves and filed a workman's comp claim, and that was the end of that program. So no good deed goes unpunished, right? So the rest of us who were staying fit, wanted to join the SWAT team, preparing for that, we lost all that. But those that were working already continue working. We just didn't get paid for it. We just did it. But the incentive, I think, was a way to get additional members, staff, to get involved and participate. I know some federal agencies have a mandatory, I don't know, 5-year, 10-year physical fitness. And also they do a follow-up on your financial statements and see how you're doing. So it's a lot, it's part of the security, if you will, of the employees. But it's not just that. To me, is what are we doing to take care of each other? It's important. So when we get together like this, like last week, I think someone mentioned already about being in person. Maybe Brian might have mentioned it. It was nice to see people in person instead of just the little boxes, but to have that ability to exchange some private conversations that we don't do on a Zoom box or on a chat panel. We take aside and we talk about how we're doing, check in with each one. Not only that, but we talk about our families. I was in Napa, and I was able to talk to Cesar Esquero from San Diego, who I hadn't seen in a while, obviously just virtual. Talked about his kids, how they doing. He asked about my family, how's my family doing? He knew my family, I knew his family, and we just had a private conversation that we missed. So I think that's also important, keeping the mental health as well. So thank you.
If anybody had any other thoughts on that. I was just informed that technology allows you to actually see the questions if they were answered. So hopefully those of you who are in the audience can see it, and you don't need me to read it for you. So that is good. But I'll turn to the chiefs to see if there are, in light of some of the comments that have been made or questions, in light of what you've heard some of your other colleagues say, what's some of your biggest takeaways, and what would be, let's say you are turning to your staff right now and talking about it, what would you like to share with them?
For me, Karen, there's a couple of things, and John reminded me of it. And you never know when you're performing a coaching service for one of your peers. You don't know when they're listening. You don't know what they're taking in from you. But I'll share with you one life hack that John Keene shared with me. He doesn't even know that he did it, but it was probably about 5 or 6 years ago, maybe longer actually. And I remember John saying to me once, "You know what, brother? I am taking my weekends back." And we didn't get deep into the conversation, but I understood what he meant at the time, because it's something where, like I said, the job's 24/7. These types of jobs are. It's part of your life. It is. It's integrated into a variety of ways. But there are those times you have to set aside for yourself. It's not that work won't creep in here and there, and it's not that that's not okay, but if you allow it to creep into everything, and if you allow it to creep in too far, then you don't have the ability to recharge, to regenerate. And that was one of those areas where he had just kind of drawn a line in the sand and said, yes, but no further. And went and reclaimed some time for himself. And I think it was probably around that time, John, where you were starting to make those adjustments in what was good for you physically and mentally, so that you could run the long race. The other thing that I would say is that when John and I were both in Alameda, one of the things that our human resources folks put together was a wellness challenge for staff. And what it highlighted for a lot of people was just how poorly they took care of their own physical needs. They didn't drink enough water. They didn't exercise enough. They didn't sleep enough. And it wasn't just work related. It was just the way that they had allowed their life to develop with, the introduction of children or marriage or other things that come along with your family as it grows and your work as it grows. And again, it sort of creeps up on you over time. And then all of a sudden you look at it one day and say, I don't like what I've become, or I'm not okay with what I've become, and I need it to change. And so we saw a lot of people participating in that program because they just wanted to see something better, and they didn't know how to do it. And that was the thing that was surprising to me. I actually served as a coach for one of the teams, and I found that people didn't know what the first step was, almost like planting a garden in your house and you've never done it before. If you don't know the first step, you might just never do it. And it's super important, I think, sometimes to reach out for advice and say, how do I take the first step to getting healthier? Whether it's mental or whether it's physical, how do I take the first step to getting healthier?
Karen, can I say one thing?
Okay.
I mean, and all the chiefs have just done an awesome job today. And I've been taking notes myself about some of the things that we need to be doing here in Fresno. But one of the things that when I was asked to be a part of the panel that I really wanted to convey to my staff, but also to others across the state, is that oftentimes me as chief, I get to see kind of the end result or the final result of folks not taking care of themselves. Oftentimes in non-productive ways, disciplinary hearings, IAs, those kinds of things. And oftentimes it's because there's been this weight that has been carried along for so long, and it manifests itself in substance abuse, alcohol abuse, domestic abuse, so many different things that can happen if a lot of these things that we've been talking about today go unaddressed. So really one of the big messages that I want to make sure that people understand is that if you are there, if that's part of where you are, your department, your chief, we want to be a help there, right? Before it turns into a situation where we have to deal with it in a different way. No one's going to run you out of the department if you come and you ask for help. It is really what foundational what we have built, the kind of relationship that I know that I've tried to engender since I've been chief, is to try to have that relationship with our administrators, with our staff, so people to know that the door is open, and so that we don't want you to just come and talk to us about a report that you have that's due or that was late or whatever. We want to know if there's a place where our department can help your family, just like it's been talked about today. We are problem solvers for everybody else, but we also want to make sure that we take care of home as well. So I really want to make sure that that message is conveyed to, because I know the chiefs that we have on the panel here and the 59 chiefs that are in the state, I absolutely feel exactly the same way. I know the group and I know who they are. And so I really want to make sure, Karen, that was one of the messages that I conveyed today, that if you are there, step to us and let us know.
What a great message. Thank you for saying that. I think sometimes we almost take that for granted around our table, and that's of course, but if we don't say it, if we don't get that message out there, it's not heard. So what an important reminder. And I'm sure you do speak for all of the chiefs on this panel, as well as those who you serve with. And so, so that is so important. And as we just discussed, really hard, I'm sure, for everyone. So hopefully some of these comments are making it a little bit easier, doing a little bit of the destigmatization of what happens when anybody needs help. And then hopefully some strategies to just remind ourselves that maybe if you do things to prevent needing to get to the place where there is more help needed, but those are all different, places on the path that, we're all trying to be sure we're keeping our eyes on and need to constantly do a better job at it, clearly. Other thoughts? I see Chief Keene
Karen,
coming off. There you
yeah,
go.
Karen, one thing I would add, Chief Haynes has brought up something that I think is just so important that we don't gloss over. And I think he said it very well. And it's not a whole lot to add other than I think a part of wellness that oftentimes is not really focused on, because as Brian said, oftentimes you're trying to figure out where to start, right? Because we live in the time where everything should be immediate and we should be able to take a pill for this or take a pill for that, or buy this, that, or the other. We're a slave to the now. But I think a huge part of this conversation is about being able to be self-reflective and really know yourself. And I think that is lost a lot in these conversations. A huge part of really turning that corner towards wellness is having that honest conversation with yourself about who you truly are, what truly makes you happy. And the hardest conversation is, what is the true source of your unhappiness? What is the true source of your discomfort that may be leading to stress? As Brian pointed out, stress is always that gap in between where you are versus where you want to be. And you can substitute anything in there, in those 2 points. And that stress in the middle of that feeling in the middle is where the stress lays out. But I think oftentimes what happens for many of us is that we mistakenly say it's one place or the other, right? And most times we say it's work, right? I know at the height of a lot of my stress, I was saying to myself, well, I'm stressed out because I don't like my job, or I don't like where I work, or I don't like who I work for, right? And it's easy to get caught in that kind of quandary, because if we're lucky, we get to have a 20 to 30-year career someplace, which means that we spend 8 to 10 hours a day. It's oftentimes more time than we spend with our family and our loved ones in this workplace. And oftentimes then we start to kind of come to this realization that we're unhappy in our life for different things. Our first thought is that it has to be at work. Work has to be the source of our unhappiness because we're there all the time. We see these same people most of the time. But a lot of really great research is happening by the Department of Labor around what truly makes you happy at work. What is the source of happiness? And then adversely, what then are your sources of unhappiness at work? So it's not going to be a raise. Most raises only have a halo effect of maybe 4 to 6 weeks. It's not going to be a new fancy chair. It's not going to be a promotion. It's not going to be, moving to a different office or, getting a sit stand. Those are not going to be the things that will make you happy long term. So what you have to do is have that honest conversation with yourself, or maybe in with the help of a professional. Oh, scary, right? We don't want to go talk to anybody because, as was said earlier, we have stigmatized this idea of going to talk to someone somehow makes us weak and not prepared. But we have to get to that point where we can truly understand what is the source of that unhappiness, what's the source of that stress. And that's when you truly unlock this opportunity to move towards wellness. Wellness is not going to avail itself to you without you doing that honest work with yourself and figuring out what really makes you happy, who you truly are, and what truly is the source. Because that's a difficult space to be, because oftentimes when you come to the true answer of what that is, now a choice is in front of you that is going to be very hard to make. And now it may cost you something to get well. It may cost you something now to achieve wellness. And you have to be honest with yourself and say, am I willing to pay that cost to be the best version or a better version of myself?
Now, John, that was really profound and really like on point. And I would go back to Brian's point, is that he walked away from being a chief after 4 years. He walked away from that. And I would say that you have to find that balance and happiness. And if it's not here, find it somewhere. You know, you can't go through life miserable. You can't go through life at a 20-year career at hating every day you walk through the job. Because that translates to family, that translates to everything else in your life. Brian came back, right? He came back because he figured it out, but he took that bold step. And that's, don't be fearful of that, but also don't be fearful of getting help. You know, there is no stigma to that. And again, you know, a staff I interviewed years ago is that she went and got help because she said, if I didn't, I wouldn't be any good at work. I would get disciplined and fired. And so I knew I had to get the help to make me well, so I would be good at work. And so, you know, that's the key, is get help if you need it. The other thing I would say is we are a competitive group. So, you know, it would be helpful if we start a listserv, or if we started something on our website to innovative things for wellness, because no chief wants to be left behind on this. You know, if John is like, you know, having his staff run around in shorts half the day, then I'm going to have my staff run around in shorts all day. You know, I mean, we're all competitive in this, and so we really need to share these things, and you really need to run into your chief and say, hey, do you know what Tracy Neal's doing up in Shasta? Why aren't we? Oh my, somebody's giving $1,000. Wow, we should give 2,000. You know what I mean? So we are competitive. So we need to start thinking of that and how to share these ideas on wellness. And it's wellness is mind, the body, and spirit. And we need to find that. We need to find all three to be balanced.
Very helpful advice, Chief Gonzales.
If you look at the International Association of Chiefs of Police, they have a complete wellness unit, because many of the officers that undergo a lot of stress take their own lives. In fact, the last couple of years, more officers take their own life than being killed on the line of duty. And this all comes back to how you manage the stress, how do you balance your work and life matter. So what Hansen was saying is absolutely true. And you heard a lot from our professions, I want to call them professionals on this panel, that are very caring for their staff, recognize what they had individually, that they needed to take care of themselves first, put on the mask first before they help others. So I hope people in the audience here can understand and appreciate that we're humans. Just because we're the chief doesn't mean that we're invisible. We're humans, we have feelings, and we always try to do the best we can for each and every one of our employees. So just keep that in mind. Take care of yourselves.
Absolutely. And, you know, this is trying to, it's interesting. We're not getting as many questions as we are comments, you know, kind of saying, we agree, this is so important. Thank you for sharing, you know, here's some things that we're doing. And Chief Hansen, you're absolutely right. We are a competitive bunch, not just the chiefs, but I suspect a lot of our staff, you know, and we're striving to do better all the time. So I think that's a great suggestion. One specific question that did come up, I do want to be sure to answer. We are recording this, and we are also trying to get better at things in our organization here at CPOC. And so we're talking about how do we get this out to be shared so that those who aren't here today can hear some of the advice and get some of the encouragement that we hope many of you seem to be taking from this. So so check back with our website. We will certainly try to get that accomplished so that others can also take advantage. Other thoughts as we're nearing the end of our time here together today. So many really important comments and tips. Any other parting thoughts from the panelists?
You know, the only thing I'll say, I noticed one of the comments about, you know, the busy nature of our work, and how do we find time to approach our chiefs. I think it's important. With the last comment was said was that, you know, even though the chiefs obviously wear a lot of hats and have a lot going on, we certainly are human beings as well. And I encourage you to talk to your chief. No one can tell you what your chief is thinking better than your chief. And I know that for many years in our profession, you know, the chiefs were always kind of like these guys that were, and ladies who were hands off. You know, you would see them and you kind of look away, and you know, they wouldn't really necessarily talk to them. But just knowing the 58 peers that I have, I just see them all as approachable people who are open and who really want to hear what your thoughts are, on a topic like this, and frankly, what your thoughts are, period, because I think one of the worst things you can do as an employee in a probation department is assume that you know what your chief is thinking. And I think it's just, regardless of the subject matter, I just highly encourage you to take that bold step, to say hello, to ask a question, to let them know what you're thinking. I just think that goes such a long way towards just, creating an environment where you feel like you can speak and be heard. And also too, allowing the chief to get to know a little bit about you, because, we don't want to put you guys in a space by hovering over you and asking a lot of questions. And, sometimes we show up places, oh my God, why is the chief here? What's the chief doing here? Who's in trouble? Who's getting walked out? It's not always that, but trust me, we're human too. We hear that. And so it stresses us out a little bit too at times about kind of coming places and, and hanging around places and hoping someone to talk to us. So just take that time to ask those questions and, to help put a human face on your department head.
I think sometimes it's helpful to walk away with like a practical tool you can take with you. And so I'll share with you one thing my organization's done. It was brought to me about 6 years ago. One of my staff, one of my managers came to me and said, I found something that I think would be helpful, and it revolves around mindset. And it's a set of tools that we could use to focus on the conversation of mindset and how to help people improve thinking about their own impact on others, as opposed to that very stressful activity that we all engage in, which is thinking about the impact everybody else is having on us. And it's a very human condition. We're wired to do it. It's what human beings do. In fact, it's a defense mechanism. But if we can learn more how to be considerate of how our impact is on other people around us, both in our family and in our work world, you can begin to breed that mentality with the people around you. And the more your organization adopts that type of thing, the more it can be, the more that you personally will benefit from it as other people are doing it. So I'm going to put something in the chat window. It's a link to the foundation that we utilize. It's called Arbinger. Maybe some of you have heard it. Most of you probably have not. But it was taught to us by an organizational development specialist that worked in our human resources department here in the county. So it's real legit stuff. It's used by the U.S. military. It's used in law enforcement. It's used in medicine and all over the darn place, all kinds of environments. And it has been very successful here in my department. And we're going to continue to expand and grow on it because we've seen such positive change in our culture as a result of our use of the tools. So.
Thank you for sharing that, Chief Richart. We are at kind of the end of our time. I think that, again, there's so many different comments in the Q&A functions, and we will go through those and see if there were a couple of questions that we missed so that we can try to get some of those answers out in written format as well to those of you who joined us. And hopefully, there were a few takeaways. It seemed like some very tangible suggestions made, so you can take some of that with you as well. But, again, the chief's message that I'm hearing loud and clear is that they are making space in their organizations to be supportive of people trying to do things to take control over their own wellness, right? So there are definitely things that you can do for each other. There are definitely things that, leadership can install for the department. But as I was musing with my staff the other day, the old adage, you can take a horse to water, but you can't make him drink. No matter how often Chief Gonzales says we need to drink our water, you have to take some ownership over that too. And I just appreciate the chief sharing that they support that. That's what I'm hearing loud and clear, and that's what we hear a lot from your colleagues as well. That you all hope that all of us take that to heart and try to find that wellness, whether it's preventative and trying to do things now in your life, or if you get to a point where you need help or something else, that you reach out. And so with that, I really appreciated the messaging, the comments, and the time that everyone gave here. So thank you all so much. And we will look to try to post this recording for those of you to share with your departments. Thank you again. Have a happy Friday.